Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming all of you guys. Welcome to Watang Yu. Nice to see everyone. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. This is the very beginning of a retreat that I'm going to be teaching over the next several days up until Friday, where I'm going to be teaching everything you need to be able to attain the first stage of enlightenment. The first 2.5 days is all the foundational teachings, but then the last 2.5 days is specialized teachings that you need to be able to make your way to the first stage of enlightenment. I'm going to help you guys to understand what that means and what that's all about as we go. There's plenty of things for me to share with you guys, but the way that I like to start each one of the learning events that I host is to start with some meditation. So if you guys would like to start with some meditation, I'm going to start with that first, and then I'll introduce you to the retreat and share a whole bunch of things with you. So welcome to all of you guys here. Welcome to everyone online. If you'd like to join in the meditation, the way that I start is with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. You're more than welcome to join in the chanting. The chanting sheets are over there on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself and chant along. If you decide to chant along, it's helpful to understand that this isn't a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer. There's none of those kinds of things in the teachings of the Buddha. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory. Every 2 weeks, his students would come together in order to recite his teachings because everything he taught was oral. So they used chanting as a learning tool or as a learning device. So you can see from the origins of chanting that this isn't a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer. If you've been exposed to any of those kinds of things as part of the teachings of the Buddha, those aren't the teachings of the Buddha. He never taught any of those kinds of things. It's all about training your mind. So chanting was used as a learning tool or as a learning device, where nowadays we use it in order to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. So you'll see if you decide to chant that it actually helps you to get more benefit out of your meditation. If you read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of that, I don't even think the Buddha created these chants himself, because the Buddha wouldn't have went around and said, here, chant these chants to me out of respect for me. This would be ego or arrogance. And by the time someone's gotten to enlightenment, they don't have any ego in their mind any longer. But if you learn from a teacher how to move from anger, sadness, and frustration and all these other discontent feelings to the peaceful, joyful mental state that is enlightenment, and this teacher didn't want anything from you or expect anything from you, you might actually have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. So that's why I think that these actually came from his students. So you're more than welcome to chant them on the way in, but at least you know there's nothing mystical or magical or no kind of ritual or ceremony or prayer or anything like that. Once we're in the meditation, I'm going to provide you some guidance where I'll be guiding you in the meditation, essentially teaching you and instructing you how to meditate. Even though as part of the retreat, I'm going to be going in detail and teaching you about meditation. During the guided meditations, I just kind of give you a little bit of instruction to help you learn it a little bit before I actually teach it to you as part of the retreat. So you'll hear me giving you that guidance for a period of time. But then there's going to be a period of time of quietness where we're all just meditating together. Everyone here at the temple and anybody joining online will just all be meditating at the same time. Now, during this time of quietness, I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds because you can't be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. That is what would cause your mind to be annoyed. If you were in meditation with a craving for permanent silence, when you hear a sound, you'll cause your mind to be frustrated or irritated or annoyed. So you'll hear a car go by, perhaps. You might hear a dog barking, a bird chirping, things like this. This is all normal. This is impermanence. This is the impermanent nature of the world. Someone here might cough or sneeze. And if you're in meditation, understanding that, oh, this is normal, this is the way the world works, that things are going to arise, they're going to change, and they're going to fade away, you can be at ease and be peaceful. But if you're in meditation with a craving for permanence, wanting and craving and expecting permanent silence, you'll cause your mind to be frustrated or annoyed during that period of time. So there'll be that period of time of quietness. Then we're going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting. And that's where I'll start the retreat, helping you guys to understand all the details of the retreat and the things that I'm going to be sharing with you guys. In terms of your body position for meditation, I'm going to be teaching all 4 positions as part of this retreat, which is seated, lying, standing, and walking. And you would use these as tools as part of your journey to enlightenment. It's like assembling a tool belt. But here I'll just introduce you to the seated position a little bit so that you can just get some basics on that and you can find something that's maybe more comfortable for you. Understand that there isn't just one fixed way to sit in meditation. If there was, that would be permanence. But we know of the universal truth of impermanence, that all of our bodies are different and different people are going to find things to be comfortable. So you can really sit however you like, whether you're on the floor, in a chair. If you're at home, you might be on a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair. You can sit however you like. If you're on the floor, you might have some cushions under your rear. This is going to provide a soft seat for you. And then if you're going to bring your legs together in the cross leg position, you might just decide to do that lightly because that allows the circulation to flow. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets your hips up in the air and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, again, allowing the circulation to flow. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. There's other options here too. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. And the same thing's true for anybody in a chair, on a bench, or a sofa, or a wheelchair. You can also sit however you like. Some people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles, but you can see me sitting in a chair here with my legs crossed. So this is an option for you as well. And then you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. In terms of your upper body, it's helpful if this is erect with the sternum up and the shoulders back. This will help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Because if you were slouched like this, you would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic in the mind. But if the upper body was real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be erect with the sternum up and the shoulders back because it's going to help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. This is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So you'd like the mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation. So if you keep your sternum up and shoulders back, it'll help you to be able to meditate. It'll also make it easy for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to do this chanting to ease into the meditation. You guys are welcome to join in, and then I'll come back in with the guidance afterwards. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savakasangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatava Manusrang Bhoto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled. Just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. สัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาพุทธังมหาเกวันังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวัตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสรังโอโตภะคะวะติ All right, if you'd like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to everyone. Nice to see everyone here this evening, this afternoon. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. This individual that we refer to as the Buddha, he figured out how to get to enlightenment. What enlightenment is where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will no longer experience any discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of this is eliminated from the mind through training of the mind. You'll notice that the mind has focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. You'll notice that your relationships are really blossoming, both personally and professionally. You won't have hostility and bitterness in your mind anymore. So you'll notice that your relationships will be all harmonious. You'll get to the point where you're not even in a bad mood any longer. It's physically impossible to experience a bad mood by the time you get to enlightenment. There's 4 individual stages of enlightenment that the Buddha shared. The mind is actually enlightened when you get to the 4th stage. That's where you're experiencing these types of benefits that I'm describing and others as well. But prior to getting to that 4th stage of enlightenment, there's the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd stages. This retreat is all about everything you would need to get to the 1st stage of enlightenment. Nobody's going to be in the 1st stage of enlightenment in just 5 days, but all the teachings that you need to actually get to that 1st stage of enlightenment are contained within this actual retreat. And oftentimes students will take this retreat multiple times because you're going to be learning things here, but you're going to most likely be learning more than you can digest in one particular retreat. So students oftentimes will learn in this particular retreat and all the other courses and programs that I teach multiple times, because each time you learn a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. It's kind of like watching a movie. Each time you watch it, if you watch it multiple times, you're going to see details that you didn't see the first time. So when you go through a learning event, you always use your best effort to be able to learn as much as you can. The Buddha teaches you to learn with eager ears, where you're actively learning. You're not going to be able to just stumble your way into the 1st first stage of enlightenment. And you definitely won't stumble your way into enlightenment itself. There needs to be dedication, determination, and diligence to actively learning, growing, and developing on the path. So that's why the Buddha teaches you to learn with eager ears, where you're actively listening and you're actively looking to be able to understand. His teachings are not based in belief. It's something that you're learning, investigating, and examining. You're reflecting on his teachings to verify if they're true or false, and you're practicing his teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life. And this is where the real transformation is occurring. So there's no belief here in the teachings of the Buddha. As you guys heard, there's no rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer. That's not what the Buddha taught. It's not about believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. The path to enlightenment is about doing this inner work, this inner growth, this inner development, becoming a better and better human being. So you might think about the teachings of the Buddha like a self-help program, that it's designed to be able to help you and guide you to this better state of being, this better way of life. And this first stage of enlightenment is a very important aspect of your journey to enlightenment, because once you get to that first stage of enlightenment, your mind can't regress backwards. It's only going to be forward progress from that point forward. It can take multiple years just to get to the first stage of enlightenment, but you'll have everything you need at the end of this retreat to be able to understand how to be able to make your way to the first stage of enlightenment. And then you're going to need help along the way as well. You're not going to be able to just take what I'm sharing in this retreat and go off on your own and get to the first stage of enlightenment. You're going to need guidance and help. So by the time we get to the end of the retreat, I'm going to be teaching you how to integrate what it is that you're learning in this retreat into your day-to-day life. I'm also going to be teaching you how to get continued support so you can continue to get help along the way. So even though I'm teaching you during this retreat, if you'd like help beyond this retreat, there's help for you beyond this retreat as well, where I can continue to guide you on the path. So the teachings of the Buddha, as I was sharing, it's not based on belief. He's helping you to learn what's called the natural laws of existence. I'm going to be exposing you to the natural laws during this retreat, where you're learning what those are, you're reflecting on them to verify if they're true or false, and you're practicing them. This is going to help you to get to wisdom. Just like with the natural law of gravity, you at one time, and me as well, didn't understand the natural law of gravity. So we struggled and have difficulties with this. We fell down, we bumped our elbows, we maybe broke open our knees, we hurt our head, we broke our toys, and we cried and we cried and we cried as a little kid because we just didn't understand the world that we lived in. And we kept falling down over and over and over again. But slowly but surely, we gained wisdom about this natural law. We never believed in the natural law of gravity. We could see it for ourselves. There it is. Right? We're not believing that this natural law exists. We can see that it's true. And when we cultivated wisdom about this natural law, we got to the point where we started making wiser and wiser decisions. We started tying our shoes a bit tighter. We started looking at the surface of the sidewalk when we were walking down the street. We stopped being so giddy and bouncing around like a kid all the time. And now you might say that we fully awoke to the natural law of gravity, meaning we fully cultivated wisdom about this natural law. That's what it means to awaken, to cultivate wisdom about the natural law. So now we can do things like climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, we can get on airplanes and fly all over the world because we fully awoke. We make wise decisions about this natural law. We no longer have struggles and difficulties with it. But when we lacked wisdom of this natural law, we struggled and we had difficulties in the world. And that's where we had experienced the stress and anxiety and frustration and agitation related to this natural law. Well, there's other natural laws that are affecting you, whether you're aware of it or not. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is what these natural laws are, so that you can learn about them. You can investigate and examine them. You can reflect on them to verify if they're true or false. And then you can practice them, making decisions through these natural laws. And now you'll experience improved results in your day-to-day life. Just like we experience improved results based on the natural law of gravity, you can do the same thing with all these other natural laws. The stress, anxiety, the frustration, all these other feelings, it's all coming from the mind's lack of wisdom. You're going to learn a teaching in this retreat called dependent origination. This is the highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddha's teachings. It's 12 interlinking steps where he's going to show you exactly why you keep experiencing discontentedness over and over and over and over again. Some of you guys might have learned the Four Noble Truths with me, which are 4 simple statements that help you to be able to understand what's causing the discontentedness. This is like a little window into the unenlightened mind. but the most detailed level that the Buddha is using to describe this is called dependent origination. And not only will it help you to understand why you keep experiencing discontentedness over and over and over again, but it's going to help you understand the cycle of rebirth. If you haven't been exposed to that before, there's no belief in the cycle of rebirth. Right now, you might be believing that you only have one life, but with dependent origination, in a way that you can independently verify, you can see these 12 interlinking steps that's not only leading to your discontentedness, but is leading to continuous rebirth over and over and over again. And what you're ultimately going to see is that it comes back to a lack of wisdom in the mind, the unknowing of true reality, that the mind lacks the ability to understand these natural laws. So it struggles in the world. And there's countless other teachings that I'm going to share with you as part of this retreat. But first, what I thought I would do to really get started is just to share the life story of the Buddha, because if you're going to study the teachings of the Buddha and take that somewhat seriously, it's nice to know his life story. What is this individual all about? Who is he? And what was his life about? So I'm going to share that with you. And then afterwards, I'm going to introduce you to the retreat and help you to understand all the details of what it is that I'm going to be sharing with you over the next several days. The way that I teach is I usually teach for like 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then I open up for questions and teach another 15, 20, 30 minutes and open up for questions. So if you guys would like to ask questions as I get to the question period, we have microphones in the white bowl here. If you guys could get a microphone and take it back to your seat, press the gray button, you'll see that the lights come on, and then you can hold this up to your chin and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't actually be able to hear you online. And then you can keep these microphones with you because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share the microphone with them. And then if you're not using it, if you could turn it off, that'll be sure that we don't get feedback through the speakers. And those of you guys that are online, you can actually ask questions too. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section. Or when you're in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like. So we'll do that same thing all the way throughout the entire retreat, that if anytime you guys would like to ask questions, you have these microphones. In fact, when you come in for the retreat, you might even just grab a microphone and have them kind of positioned around the room, because I'm sure there's going to be questions at some point. So normally I teach, like I said, 15, 20, 30 minutes, open up for questions, teach 15, 20, 30 minutes, open up for questions. But this particular topic of the life story of the Buddha, it's usually best if I just teach the whole life story and then I open up for questions at the end, because that way you can hear the entire life story of the Buddha. This individual that we refer to as the Buddha, he started out as Siddhartha Gotama. He was born into a royal family. His mom was a queen, his dad was a king, and he was born in an area that we refer to as Nepal. Today, that's what we refer to it as, but back then, that border between India and Nepal didn't exist. It was just a bunch of kingdoms. So he was born in modern-day Nepal, and he was born in 563 BCE. This was over 2,500 years ago. When he was born, his mother was being the queen, they were taking her back to her homeland in order to give birth, because the customs at this time is if you were pregnant as a woman, they would take you back to your homeland where your parents and your siblings and people like this knew you, so that when you deliver, there'd be people to be able to help you with the child. So in this journey on the way home, she ends up going into labor pains. So they stop the caravan, she gets out and she goes over to this tree, and she's holding on to this branch of the tree, trying to deliver the baby standing up, because the baby was having difficulties coming out through the normal birthing canal. And she was having such difficulties getting the baby out through the birthing canal, it comes through the side of her stomach, and breaking through the side of the stomach, she ends up dying 7 days later. Where today we would just done a C-section and she would have been just fine. But 2,500 years ago, they didn't have that technology. So she ended up dying 7 days after his birth. And because this was not uncommon, they actually had protocols in place for this too. That if as a female, if you died during childbirth and your children lived, then your siblings would adopt your children as their own children. So his mother had a older sister, and she adopted him to be her own child. So his aunt became his stepmother, and she raised him as her own child. Now, there's something that's said to have happened at his birth. It's actually in the original teachings, in the original text from the original teachings of the Buddha. I don't think it's actually true, but I'm going to share it with you because it's in the original text, and I'll explain to you why I don't think it's true. Because at the time of his birth, it's said in the original teachings that when he came out of his mom's stomach, he walked 7 steps, lotus flowers blossomed under his feet, and he spoke and he said, "This will be my last birth." But I don't think this part of the story is true, because oftentimes when there's someone as significant as a Buddha that comes into the world, that there's an embellishment of the story, because he already did something very wonderful during his life. But sometimes as stories are handed down from person to person to person, they're kind of embellished upon to make him look even better than he already was. But we don't need to embellish the story of a Buddha. A Buddha has already done some amazing things, so we don't need to actually embellish the story of a Buddha. Because if this part of the story was true, the next part of the story actually wouldn't be needed. And that's why I think that this part of the story is not true. So the next part of the story is his father, being the king, was interested to know what his son was going to become. As part of the customary practices during that time, the king would summon advisors or fortune tellers to come and let him know what his son was going to become. Well, if your son comes out and he's walking right away from birth, lotus flowers are blossoming under his feet, and he's speaking, you really don't need anybody to tell you this child's pretty special, right? You don't need fortune tellers to come and let you know what this child's going to become. But nonetheless, that's what is in the story. So that's why I share it with you. So these fortune tellers come to explain to his father what his son's going to become. And 108 advisors come. 107 of them come to the king and they say, "Your son's going to be a great monarch. He's going to be a great leader. He's going to rule over your territory. He's going to expand it far and wide." And of course, his father's like, "That's my boy." Okay, right? He's really proud of that. That's what he wants. That's what he's interested in, seeing his kingdom expand. But then there's one advisor who comes in at the end and he apologizes to the king. And he says, "Sir, I'm so sorry." He said, "I heard what those other advisors said, and they are actually speaking the truth. Your son is going to be a great leader, but he's not going to be a monarch. He's not going to expand your territory. He's going to be a spiritual leader." And his father didn't like this. So he decides he's going to sequester his son in the palace and never let him go outside and get involved in worldly affairs. He thought that he could maybe kind of woo him into the ways of being a monarch if he kind of lavished him with all kinds of gifts and a lifestyle that would be unattainable if he was doing anything else other than being a monarch and a ruler. So a rich royal father lavished his son with everything you can imagine that he could give to his son. Wonderful fabrics to wear his clothing, outstanding food to eat, great entertainment, beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him. Anything you can imagine that a rich royal father could give, he gave it to his son, thinking that he could get him hooked into this lifestyle of being a monarch and a king and a ruler. So at the age of 29, he's been sequestered in the palace his entire life, living this life of luxury. And he's about to become the king. And he knows he's about to become the king because at the age of 30, you would become the king. And then your father would retire and then be right alongside of you to teach you how to become a king. So at the age of 29, he knew that, hey, I'm about to become the king here, and I've never even been outside the palace. How could I rule over these people if I've never even been outside in the kingdom? So without his father knowing and against his wishes, he decides to go outside into the kingdom, and he takes with him his royal attendant. This is like his chief of staff, his main confidant. And he goes outside the palace to be able to observe what's going on in the kingdom. And he has what's called the 4 observations. These 4 observations are that he saw an aging person, a sickly person, a dead corpse, and he saw a roaming ascetic, someone who's given up worldly life in order to be able to seek a better understanding of life. And when he has these 4 observations, it's really impactful to him because he sees things that he'd never seen before. When he sees this aging person, this older person who was having difficulties moving around and mobility, and there was a lot of disgruntledness and frustration around this person, he had to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? And he's like, oh, that person's going to have trouble getting the basic necessities to sustain their life. They can't work as well as they could when they were young, and now them and their family is really disgruntled about this. And this has a real impact on him. And then he sees the sickly person. Same thing, a lot of disgruntledness, a lot of frustration. And he needs to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? And he's like, oh, they're not going to be able to get what they need in order to sustain their life because they're sick. And now they're not going to be able to provide for their family. And then he sees the dead corpse. And the same thing, the family's grieving and sorrowful. And he needs to ask his royal attendant, what's going on there? And it was the same story, that they were going to have difficulties acquiring the basic necessities to sustain their life. Well, if you grew up in the palace for 29 years, living this life of luxury, and that's all you ever known in your life, you'd probably think everybody lived in that same exact way. So when he saw these three situations where people were struggling, it had a real impact on him. And the way that he looked at the world is he looked at it as being full of misery and despair, because he lived this life of luxury, but yet out here in the kingdom, people were living in this way that they were really struggling. And then he sees this fourth observation. The fourth observation is he sees a person who's off meditating and training their mind. And he asks his royal attendant, like, what's that person doing? And he's like, oh, that person? They're trying to figure out all of this. They're trying to figure out why we experience so much disgruntledness and frustration during aging, sickness, and death. And Siddhartha Gotama decides that's what he's interested in doing. He felt like if he became the ruler and the king, that he'd be ruling over misery and despair, and he wasn't interested in doing that. He was interested in helping people escape out of that. So he ends up deciding that he's going to leave the royal palace and go on this journey to try to figure out how to help people escape out of this misery and despair. So he goes back to the palace, and when he goes back to the palace, his wife and his young infant son are actually sleeping because he's married and he has a young son at this time. And he decides he's going to leave in the middle of the night. Instead of waking them up and saying goodbye, he decides to just leave in the middle of the night because he didn't understand his mind as well as he would by the time he actually got to enlightenment. But he understood it enough that he felt like if he woke up his family, that he wouldn't be able to say goodbye and he wouldn't be able to go on this journey because it would just kind of keep him stuck at the palace. So he decides he's going to leave in the middle of the night without waking them up because he felt like he would be able to better walk away from the palace by doing it that way. So when he left, he took with him his favorite horse and he took his royal attendant with him. And he leaves out of the palace, eventually getting to a point where he turns his horse loose and he tells his royal attendant he's been a great person to help him and he can go back to the palace or whatever he'd like to do. And he goes off on his own. He ends up cutting off his hair. At this point, he has this long, beautiful, flowing hair because this is how they could tell that you were a member of the royal family. If you went out into the kingdom with this long, beautiful, flowing hair, they knew you were a member of the royal family because it was only the royalty that had the time and the resources to be able to take care of this hair. Where today, we would just put the picture of the king and the queen all over the kingdom or on the money, and we would know like, oh, there's the king, there's the queen, we know who they are. But they didn't have that technology back then. So they would just grow their hair very long because it was only the royalty that had the ability to have servants and the time to sit back and have servants brush their hair, detangle their hair, shampooing their hair and all this kind of stuff. So if you went out in the kingdom with this long, beautiful hair, they knew, you're a member of the royal family. So him cutting off his hair that he had been growing for 29 years is like, I'm never going back. I'm never going back because nobody would ever think that he was actually the king because he didn't have this long, beautiful flowing hair. So he ends up taking up training with these two teachers. First, one teacher, he trains with this teacher for about a year. And as he's training with this teacher, they're teaching him to hang himself upside down from trees. He's laying on beds of nails. He's piercing his body with metal implements. He's starving himself. They thought this is the way to get to enlightenment. Don't worry, we're not going to be doing any of those kinds of things as part of our retreat. There is a tree over there, but we're not going to be hanging ourselves upside down from it, okay? But nonetheless, this was the thought. They thought if you cause physical pain to the body and your mind could overcome that you would actually get to enlightenment. So he did this for an entire year, these kinds of things. And the teacher comes to him and says, you've mastered my teachings. You can start sharing my teachings. And Siddhartha Gotama realized his mind wasn't any more peaceful than when he was in the palace. So he leaves from this teacher and he goes studies with someone else. And he's studying with this second teacher. Pretty much the same thing. Teaching him to hang himself upside down from trees, lay on beds of nails, pierce his body with metal implements, starve himself. And at the end of this year, the teacher essentially declared the same thing, that you're a master of my teachings. But his mind wasn't any more peaceful. So he was frustrated with the whole thing, and he decides to go off on his own to be able to try to figure out how to get to enlightenment. So when he goes off into the forest after 2 years, he thinks that he's wasted his time, but he didn't have any other option. So he goes off into the forest and he's trying to train his mind, but the only things he knows how to do is what these teachers actually were teaching him. So he continues to starve himself and do these different things that he had learned. He takes this so far that he was only eating 1 grain of rice per day. right? This is what he was doing, just 1 grain of rice per day to sustain his body. So he was on the edge of the forest and he was meditating. And there was this woman and her young daughter that come by, and they see that he's basically skin and bones, and they think he's about to die. And they beg and plead with him to eat some rice, and they're offering him this rice. And he reluctantly accepts this rice from this woman and this daughter. And in this moment, he has a realization, meaning that he starts to understand things about the world that he didn't understand before. He realizes what we now refer to as the middle way. That he understood that when he was in the palace, he was living this life of sensual pleasure, where he had everything and anything that you could imagine. But when he left from that, he swung all the way to the other side, where he was eating 1 grain of rice per day, right? And neither of these two extremes don't lead to enlightenment. So he then figures out that he needs to come to the middle, where he starts doing things in moderation, and he starts eating again, and he starts training his mind. Instead of disparaging the physical body, he starts training his actual mind. And now over the next 4 years, he figures out how to get to enlightenment. And he knows he's enlightened after this 6-year journey because his mind's peaceful, it's joyful. He doesn't experience any of those discontent feelings. The mind's focused and has concentration, clarity, and deep memory. But he knew his teachings were vastly different than anything that anybody else was teaching at the time. So he wasn't sure whether or not he was going to share his teachings with others. He goes to this tree, which is in northeast India, Bodh Gaya, India, and he hangs out at this tree for 7 weeks to determine whether or not he should actually share his teachings or he should go back to the kingdom and kind of be part of the royal family again. So he hangs out at this tree for 7 weeks, and ultimately we know the end of that is that, yes, he decided to share his teachings. And when he did, he decided he was going to go back to the area where he was studying with those first 2 teachers, and he ends up going back to that area, and he encounters 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. And when they see him coming, they start laughing at him and joking him and mocking him. They thought that he'd actually given up on the path to enlightenment, because when they saw him coming, he was looking very bright, very radiant. He had meat on his bones. He was very healthy. To them, to be able to get to enlightenment, you had to be starving yourself, right? So when they saw this healthy, vibrant person coming towards them, they were like, he's given up. And they started laughing at him and joking him and mocking him. But by the time you get to enlightenment, that kind of thing doesn't affect you. Your mind is unaffected. You're not going to be upset or frustrated by that kind of thing. So he comes over to where they're at. He sits down on the ground and he takes his hand and he touches the ground and he performs the one and only miracle that he ever performed. When he touched the ground, called animals to where he was at. So there were deer and squirrels and rabbits and birds and lizards and all these different animals came to where he was at. And these individuals, these first 5 people, were like, okay, you've got my attention. What do you have to share? And they sat down and he started sharing with them what's called the 4 Noble Truths. This is a teaching that I'm going to share tomorrow. Some of you guys have already learned it with me. Others, it might be your first time, where in 4 simple statements, you're going to be able to understand what is the problem in your mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And remember, his teachings are independently verifiable. So you're going to be able to independently verify what I share with you. And he shared the 4 Noble Truths with them. And at the end of that discussion, they knew that he had gotten to enlightenment because they could independently verify that his teachings were true. Because all the while they were causing this harm to the body, he was talking about training of the mind. And they could tell through independent verification that his teachings were actually true. So from that point forward, he continues to teach those people and countless other people. He gets to enlightenment at the age of 35, and he teaches all the way to the age of 80. For 45 years. That's when he dies at the age of 80. In 483 BC is when he dies. And during this period of time, this 45 years, there were countless people who got to enlightenment during his lifetime. These are the 3 criteria of what makes a Buddha, is they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So this is what makes him a Buddha. And this particular individual who we refer to as the Buddha or Gotama Buddha or any number of other ways that people refer to him, he meets all three of these criteria. So he teaches all the way until the age of 80. When he dies of old age, oftentimes people think that he died of a poisonous sandwich. I don't know if you guys have heard that story before. This is actually not true. If you believe this story, then you would think that he committed suicide. That's essentially what people share. But he actually died of old age. It's very clear in the original teachings that he died of old age. And I have this in the book series. You can read about this. But essentially, at the age of 80, the lining of his stomach started to tear away from the body, and he actually ends up dying at the age of 80. And there were countless people that got to enlightenment during his lifetime. Everything that he taught was oral during his lifetime, because they didn't have the ability to write things down. It wasn't until after he died that the technology made its way into that region of the world where they could start documenting his teachings. And we now refer to that as the Pali Canon. It's 45 volumes of books that are about this thick, where this is the largest, most complete collection that we have of the teachings of the Buddha. This book series that I share consolidates that down into 13 books that makes it something manageable and approachable that you can actually learn and actually help you to be able to make your way to enlightenment. You wouldn't have to learn all those 45 volumes of books. And everything that the Buddha taught is not in the Pali Canon. We know that. And also we know everything that's in the Pali Canon is not what the Buddha taught. We would be naive to think that everything in the Pali Canon is what the Buddha taught because of impermanence. Things have constantly changed over the time frame. But the way you cut through that impermanence is you don't believe any of the teachings. You learn, you reflect, and you practice. So while sickness, aging, and death were the motivators that motivate him to go on this journey to be able to understand his mind, he ultimately figured out why people experience that disgruntledness and frustration during these three major times of their life. That when someone's sick, they're craving permanent health, and they want this body to be permanently healthy, when in reality, this body is not permanent. It is impermanent. So if you're craving permanent health, meaning you're longing, yearning for that, when you don't have it, you'll be frustrated or annoyed or agitated or some other discontent feeling. If you're craving permanent youthfulness, when you're aging and you're experiencing the slowing down of the body, the aches and the pains, you don't move around as much, maybe you're having some wrinkles or gray hair or things like this, you'll be disgruntled and frustrated if you're craving permanent youthfulness. And then the same thing is if you're craving permanent life, when you get to the point of death, this can be a real struggle for you because your mind's holding on, wanting this life to be permanent, when in reality it is not permanent. And you might even struggle not only for your own sickness, aging, and death, but the people around you that you're close with. When you see them experiencing sickness, aging, and death, it can be a real struggle for you because the mind's craving permanence. And I'll talk about this more when we discuss the Four Noble Truths tomorrow. So this is the life story of the Buddha and why we refer to him as a Buddha. This type of individual is very rare in the world. The last one that the world's currently aware of exists over 2,500 years ago. You'll be able to get to enlightenment, but you're going to need teachers and guides to help you because a Buddha, an individual who's going to become a Buddha, has one quality of mind that the average person doesn't have. They have a very deep memory, even in the unenlightened state. An individual who's going to become a Buddha, they have an unlimited capacity to remember countless details about their current life and their past lives too. For you, you have a certain limited capacity, kind of like a hard drive on a computer, maybe 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte, right? And now when you get to the point where you have met your maximum amount of storage capacity, you've got to delete old files in order to store new files. That's why when you think back to your childhood, you just have spotty memories, where in the last 5-10 years or so, you have better direct recall of the things that you've been doing. Because as you're writing these new files, you're deleting old files in order to store these new files. But an individual who's going to become a Buddha, they don't have that. They have an unlimited capacity where they can remember countless details about their current life and their past lives too. And they put together all this wisdom in their last life to be able to actually get to enlightenment without any help of any teachers or any guides. So a individual who meets these three criteria is very rare in the world. Sometimes you'll hear people tell you that everybody is a Buddha, or that you have Buddha nature, or you have Buddhahood, or you will attain Buddhahood. This isn't actually true. The Buddha never actually taught those kinds of things. Those are misunderstandings of what people are talking about today. But if you go back to his original teachings, you'll see what he talked about, which is it's very rare for a Buddha to exist in the world. So I'm just going to stop here and see if you guys have any questions on the life story of the Buddha. Anything you guys would like to ask at this point? Looks like Boulder might have a question. Those of you guys that are online, you can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. If you'd like to get a microphone, you're welcome to.
Yeah. I do have a question, David.
Mm-hmm.
But simple ones, I think. I want to know the history the story. Just the time. So you said he was 2 years in the forest with other teachers.
He was 2 years with other teachers.
Yeah, and then there were 4 years alone in the forest when it was still just sort of before the middle way and all that.
Right.
So that was a whole 4 years on his own.
Yes, but he still came in contact with other people.
Yeah.
Sometimes when people think he was in the forest, they think he's isolated by himself in a cave or something like this. Mm-hmm. But every day he had to get food. So he would come around regular, average household people so that he could acquire donations of food.
Okay. Thanks. And another question. So at the time, the idea of enlightenment existed. Do you know how people define that or?
Yeah, it's just like today. Like the idea of enlightenment exists and many different people are talking about it, but people don't necessarily have the clarity to understand exactly what it is unless they've actually experienced it. So for an individual who's a Buddha, who's gotten to enlightenment by himself, he would know exactly what enlightenment is, and he'd be able to explain exactly how to attain it, and he'd be able to help people understand what it is. So while the concept of enlightenment was around, people didn't necessarily understand it. Even today, if you talk to some people, they'll tell you that, enlightenment, you can't explain it. It's undescribable. Well, yeah, for someone who hasn't gotten to enlightenment, it's undescribable. But for someone who's actually experiencing that mental state, it's very describable. You can explain exactly what it is. So the Buddha was able to put clarity into the world on these teachings that didn't exist prior to him. So even meditation was going on before him. Even the natural law of karma was being discussed before him. Even things like the Brahma Viharas was being discussed. Things like this. Enlightenment was being discussed. But people didn't have the level of clarity that he brought. That's what a Buddha does because they're fully, perfectly enlightened. So they're able to bring a level of clarity that other people don't have. And now they present that whole package because if that is what led to their enlightenment, then that's what's going to lead to your enlightenment too. And then it's best to not ever try to change those teachings because once you start changing and tweaking the teachings of a Buddha, they don't lead to enlightenment any longer. So the Buddha cautioned people not to change his teachings, but because people didn't learn his teachings from his original words, people did change his teachings, either overtly or inadvertently. And this is why you see so many misunderstandings in the world, where what I'm interested in is seeing more and more people understand exactly what he taught and what he didn't teach. Mm-hmm.
Just a final quick question. The Pali Canon, I know it's the most comprehensive. Is it the oldest or does it appear around the same time as other things?
It's the largest, most complete collection we have of his teachings. It dates back to about 12 or 1300 years ago, where we know that there were things before that. So right after the death of the Buddha, 500 enlightened beings got together, and there were countless of them, but about 500 of them got together and started documenting his teachings. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, whatever it took to get to your enlightenment, you'll never forget that. It'll be crystal clear in your mind because it's like upgrading the operating system of your mind. So these people had very clear recall of what it took for them to get to enlightenment. So they started documenting it shortly after his death, but the collection of teachings that we call the Pali Canon didn't really come about until about 12 or 1300 years ago, even though there were other documents before that. People used to always think that the Buddha spoke in Pali during his lifetime, but about 10 years ago or so, we found some remnants of another document that was the precursor to the Pali Canon, and it was in a completely different language than Pali. So they think that the Buddha spoke that language, and then they translated from that into what we call the Pali Canon. Okay, yes, sir. Looks like you just need to press the button. It's on now. Nope, not yet. Once you press the button, you'll see the lights come on. And it just takes a second.
It's working. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Great. Thanks for that story.
Mm-hmm.
So when the Buddha was in isolation, he was educated, wasn't he educated? Like, what did he learn?
They didn't have educational systems the way that we do today, where like we learn science and English and math and all these kind of things. They didn't have those kinds of structured learning during his lifetime. So he learned growing up in the palace from the people at the palace, you know, how to be a king and so forth and so on. So he was able to learn by putting together all this wisdom from his current life and his previous life, different experiences that he had. And that's what allowed him to peer into the human mind, to be able to understand the human mind. Because essentially what he was, in my opinion, was the world's foremost expert on human psychology. And he took human psychology and he boiled it down to a common denominator that the average person could understand. And now with us, this understanding, you can actually purify the mind and experience the same mental state that he experienced. So whether he learned, you know, any kind of mathematics or any of these other things that we learn today, I don't have any of that kind of information. I suspect he didn't learn that in any kind of structured or formal way, but he would have had some level of understanding in terms of languages and the world around him and stuff like that.
And what was the religion before the Buddha, or what did people, in different kingdoms, what do they believe in? Did they have temples? Do they believe in more than one god? Like, for example, in ancient Greece?
Yeah, the primary thing that was happening at the time, we refer to it as Brahmanism, where today we would probably call it Hinduism, where what it was people were born into a certain class or caste, and there were Brahmin who were born into this Brahmin caste. And it was like 15% of society that if you were born into this family, they considered you holy just because you were born into this family. And now all the rest of us, the other 85% of us, we were taught that we couldn't improve our life and we needed to go to a Brahmin in order to pay them money and have them do rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer on our behalf. And they believed in multiple gods, and they thought it was only these Brahmin that could communicate with the gods. And if we paid them a fee, they would communicate on our behalf, and then our life was going to get better. And the Buddha knew that this wasn't true, and he was teaching the opposite of this. He was teaching you to cultivate wisdom, and it was your decisions that led to improvement. So if you were having difficulties with your life partner, for example, and you went to a Brahmin and you were like, hey, my children are having difficulties in, you know, experiencing this and experiencing that. Me and my husband or wife or whomever you're with, they were having difficulties. They would be like, all right, well, that's $5. I'll do the ceremony for you. And you go home and your life gets better. Well, now when you go home and your life doesn't get better, you come back and you're like, well, it's even worse now. I've got all these problems. Oh, that's going to be a different ceremony. And that's going to cost you more money to fix that. So now there was all this corruption. And they did teach a bit of moral conduct, but these people were opposed to what it was that the Buddha was teaching, because the Buddha was putting the power in the hands of the people and saying, you can improve your life, where these people who were making money off of the rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, they were going to be out of a job and they weren't going to be the holy people any longer. So this is one of the reasons why Buddhism never really flourished to the point where all of India was able to actually practice as deeply as maybe we might think, that if that's where it originated, then maybe it would flourish there. But this group of people, who was 15% of society, were opposed to it, and they were trying to knock it down and destroy it so that people wouldn't be able to get access to it, because then it means you're out of a job and you're no longer this upper class of society any longer.
Got it. Thanks.
Testing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned that Prince Siddhartha, he had to leave his family in order to go pursue enlightenment and become the Buddha. So I'm just curious, how did his family feel about kind of losing him, and what was the rest of his life like? Did he have contact with his family, or did he kind of isolate himself from family as well?
Sure. So he left his wife and his young infant son in a royal palace, right? That's a pretty nice thing to do. Sometimes people are like, oh, he's a deadbeat dad. He left his family. No, he left them in a royal palace. If you were left in a royal palace, you'd probably be pretty appreciative of that. But nonetheless, he went off on his own for 6 years because he needed to train his mind. He needed to get his own mind in a certain place. But then he ends up coming back to that region of the world, and his son, his wife, his stepmother, his aunt, all these people started ordaining with him. So he had contact with his family. People think that he left his family and never went back, and this isn't actually true. You can see in the original teachings where it's documented that he's teaching his son, his wife, his stepmother, his aunt. He's teaching all these people, and they actually get to enlightenment during that lifetime. There is one particular story where it seems like his wife and son hadn't seen him for a while, and he was teaching, and they weren't yet ordained with him. And his wife says to her son, "There's your father. Go get your inheritance from him." And his son comes over and he's like, "I would like my inheritance." And he says, "Well, I've let all that go. I don't have that any longer. But what I have to give you is much better than that. What I have to give you is the wisdom of how to get to enlightenment. And I'll be pleased to give you that." Right. And now his son ends up training with him, ultimately getting to enlightenment. His wife ends up training with him, gets to enlightenment, his stepmother, all these people, so much so that people are coming out of the royal family to ordain with him. His father comes to him and begs and pleads with him to stop ordaining people from the royal family, because his father was attached to the royal family. He was craving for it to be permanent, where it was kind of falling apart because they were all coming to learn with Siddhartha Gotama, or the Buddha. So the Buddha actually institutes a guideline that's still in place today, that if you would like to ordain, you had to have the permission of your family. So if you were living at home with your parents had to approve of you to be able to come ordain. Or if you were a life partner and you had a life partner, that they, and if you had children, would have to approve of you to become ordained. Because when you're stepping out of the home, it's kind of putting more responsibility on other people. So even today here in Thailand, if you go to become ordained, the first people who cut your hair is your family. That's like a signifying their support for you to become ordained. So this is something that happened during the lifetime of the Buddha, where oftentimes people think that he left and never came back, but that's people who haven't studied the actual teachings. You can see that he taught his son, his wife, his stepmother, his cousins and brother-in-laws, and all these people were coming to learn with him. So he had finally figured this out, and he had some wonderful gift to give to people.
Yeah. So then did someone else in the royal family become the king then, since he was supposed to be, but he became Buddha? Just curious how the rest of it worked for the family.
I'm not sure about what happened with the throne and who ended up assuming the throne. I'm not sure about that. I haven't seen any information on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I think this is all the questions. Let me just check here online, see if we have any questions. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you guys. Okay, I don't see any questions here online. So what I'm going to do to wrap up this part of our topic is to share this with you. I share with you, no one ever said that life would be easy, but it's also not supposed to be tough. Learning Gotama Buddha's teachings is not easy, but learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha will ensure that life is not tough. So as you're approaching this path to enlightenment, it's not easy, but it's also not tough. Right? Oftentimes people have made it difficult, that they're not learning with the original words of the Buddha, and they might say, oh, it's so hard to get to enlightenment. Yeah, if you're not studying with the original words of the Buddha and you don't have guidance to be able to help you, sure, I can see why you might think it's difficult. But when you learn the wisdom from the original teachings and you have guidance to be able to help you, and you're part of a community of people, you can make your way to enlightenment. There's no reason why you can't. So this mental state that the Buddha experienced during his lifetime, you can experience that too. It's just a matter of learning, growing, and developing on the path. And by learning and growing and developing, sure, it's challenging, but it's going to ensure life is not tough. Because showing up to a place like this and just believing a bunch of things, somebody's doing rites and rituals, ceremonies, worship, and things like this, that's really easy to do. For about an hour, you can show up and do all these easy things of just believing. But then the rest of your life is really difficult because you haven't learned any wisdom to really help you and grow and develop into a better and better person. Coming to a place like this, where you guys are going to hear things that are very different than what you currently think about the world, that's challenging. It's challenging to sit here and listen to someone for 5 days and think about what it is that they have to share with you. And especially when it's conflicting with things that you currently think about the world, that's very challenging. But in doing so, in cultivating wisdom, that ensures that the rest of your life is not tough. So you can either put the belief and all that other stuff up front, and then the rest of your life is really difficult. Or you can put the challenging stuff up front where you're learning, growing, and developing, cultivating wisdom, and then your life is quite easy. So that's the way that I think about this. It's kind of like climbing a mountain, that if you were standing at the bottom of the mountain and you were looking up at the top of the mountain, it looks like, oh my gosh, this mountain is so tall. How am I ever going to climb this? Because when we get to the end of this retreat and you hear the things that you need to practice, you need to understand intellectually, you need to reflect, and you need to practice, you're going to be like, wow, that's just to get to the first stage of enlightenment. It's going to look like the mountain is really tall. And of course, when you're standing at the bottom of the mountain, it looks really tall. But if you just focus on one step at a time, and that's all you focus on, you can gradually start making your way up this mountain. And if you're partially up the way of the mountain and your thighs are hurting, your hips are hurting, what do you usually do? What do you usually do? Yeah, you sit down and you take a break, right? You rest your hips, you rest your thighs, you eat some trail mix, drink some water or whatever it is that you've got, and you take a break, right? And now you start making your way up the mountain again. But the difference about this journey up the mountain to get to enlightenment is that normally when you walk up an actual physical mountain, you get up to the top of the mountain and the view is beautiful. The air is really fresh, beautiful view. And after you're done enjoying that, you've got to come back down, right? But the difference is that the enlightened mental state is a permanent mental state, that when you get to this enlightened mental state, you don't have to come back down, that you've done all this work to get to the top of this mountain, and now you get to enjoy the view and the fresh air for the rest of your life. It's a permanent mental state. So no one ever said life was going to be easy, but it's not supposed to be tough. If there's certain parts of your life that are difficult and struggle, it's just because there's certain wisdom that you lack. And oftentimes what the unenlightened mind does when you're walking towards something and it feels difficult and it feels like a struggle, the mind wants to run away from it. It typically wants to push that thing away and run away from it. If you do that kind of thing in your life, you're just ensuring that that thing is going to repeat over and over and over and over again. Because the only reason why that thing feels difficult is because the mind lacks certain wisdom. So if you run away from that challenge, you've never cultivated the wisdom to overcome it. So therefore, when you face that challenge again, it's going to experience the same thing. The same thing is going to repeat over and over and over again because you never cultivated the wisdom. So when you experience a struggle and a difficulty, the best thing you can do is walk towards it and now cultivate the needed wisdom to overcome that challenge. And then you'll ensure that it'll never happen again. Because if you ever face that thing again, you already have the wisdom of how to overcome it. The way the Buddha talks about this is he says, do not shrink back from the struggle. Do not shrink back from the struggle. Because if you shrink back from the struggle, you're just ensuring that it's going to occur again. Instead, turn around and walk towards it. So this week, we're going to have a great time. We're going to be doing all kinds of wonderful things. But I'm sure there's going to be some struggles for you along the way. As I'm sharing things that completely conflict with everything you've ever thought about the world, that's a real struggle. But rather than run away from that, turn around and walk towards it. Turning around and walking towards it in this example is to ask questions, right? If there's something that I'm sharing that you don't quite understand or it conflicts with what you thought about the world, just ask questions to clarify, right? That's how you're going to be able to meet the struggle and cultivate the wisdom. And sometimes there's certain things that you're going to learn in a retreat like this that you're not going to get at 100% during our time together. this topic of dependent origination, there's some students that take 6 months to a year to be able to understand that particular teaching. So there's going to be things that you're learning on your way to the first stage of enlightenment that aren't exactly clear and apparent when you first start learning them. And that's a really good thing. Because if you're in a classroom like this, where everything that the teacher is saying, you already know, you're in the wrong classroom. You're not growing. You're not developing, right? So you would like to be in a classroom with a teacher where you're learning things that you don't understand and you're needing to have to ask questions to clarify. If at any point there's something that I share that conflicts with what you currently understand about the world, all you need to do is ask me how to independently verify what it is that I'm sharing. Because everything that I share with you has already been independently verified by me, or else I wouldn't be sharing it with you. I don't share things with you that somebody told me or something that I heard from somebody else. I'm sharing with you the things that I know to be 100% true and that will absolutely lead to this enlightened mental state. So when you hear things that conflict with what you currently think about the world or the teachings of the Buddha or this path to enlightenment, just ask me, how do you independently verify that? And I will show you exactly how to independently verify it and help you to be able to see that truth and cultivate that wisdom, because that's what's going to ensure that life is not tough. Okay, so this is wrapping up this topic here. And now what I'm going to share with you are the benefits of getting to this first stage of enlightenment, because that's what this retreat is all about, is helping you get to the first stage of enlightenment. This was just a bit of the life story of the Buddha, so you understand the person who actually shared these teachings. I have deep respect, gratitude, appreciation for the Buddha, because without him, we wouldn't be able to experience this enlightened mental state. And these are just some of the qualities of the first stage of enlightenment. And there's actually qualities beyond this once you actually get to enlightenment itself. These first 6 are actually directly from the Buddha, and I verified these things. And then there's another one here that I've added for you as well. What he says is that getting to the first stage of enlightenment, one is fixed in the wholesome teachings, meaning that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you have seen such progress to the condition of the mind that you are fixed in these teachings. And you know without a doubt that it's these teachings that are leading to improvement to the condition of your mind in your life. You're not enlightened yet by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, but there's been a significant decrease in your discontentedness, and you've seen significant improvements in your life that you're fixed on these teachings. You'll know that these teachings are leading to improvement. It's just that your mind's not enlightened yet. So you're not going to be bothered with all these other things that are in the world telling you to do this and telling you to do that and telling you to do this. By the time you're get to the first stage of enlightenment, you've seen such progress that you know, oh, it's these teachings that are truly leading to improvement to the condition of our mind. And then you don't have to waste your time with all these other things. One is incapable of decline. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind can't regress backwards out of that. There's preliminary phases that you're going to experience before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. These are referred to as the jhanas. I'm going to be explaining those as part of our retreat. We have a class where I'm going to be teaching you what these jhanas are and what you're going to be experiencing. These are enhanced qualities of mind that you'll be experiencing on your way to the first stage of enlightenment. If you're in the jhanas and you became complacent, your mind can actually regress backwards. You'll have backwards decline. But when you get to the first stage of enlightenment, there's no regression of the qualities of the mind that you've acquired at that point. Your discontentedness is limited. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, whatever amount of discontentedness you experience, like anger, sadness, frustration, and all those other feelings prior to getting on the path to enlightenment, by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, it's just a mere fraction of what it once was. You're going to notice that the anger, the frustration, the irritation, while it's still there, it's not nearly as significant as it was when you were off the path to enlightenment. So you're going to see this significant decrease in your discontentedness by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. One comes to possess wisdom not shared by others. There's certain wisdom about this world, these natural laws that you will have by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment that other people in the world won't have. This is where you're going to need to keep your conceit or your ego, your arrogance, your pride in check. Because oftentimes when you have this wisdom that other people don't have, The mind's ego and arrogance and pride can come in. The conceit, where you're maybe measuring and comparing yourself to other people. Because you'll see people struggling with something that just looks so easy to you. Because your wisdom from these teachings, you understand exactly what's going on there. But this person is struggling with it, and they're lacking concentration and focus that you have so easily, readily in your mind. So you're going to need to be aware of that you'll have wisdom that's not shared by others, but you're going to need to keep your conceit in check, because the mind's conceit can really come up during this period of time. One has clearly seen causation. What the Buddha is talking about here is that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will have clearly seen the natural law of Gotama. You will know that this is true. This is a natural law of cause and effect, or action and result. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's not about punishments and rewards. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. There's no being that's overseeing this or anything like that. You might have heard this referred to as karma. This is the Sanskrit version, where in the Pali language, it's referred to as Gama. So people who study the original words of the Buddha will tend to refer to it as Gama. So this is cause and effect. You guys are going to be learning about this in detail. We could say that everything and anything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. So by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're not fully awake to the natural law of Gama, but you've at least seen it very clearly, that you'll know with 100% certainty that it's true. And there's more to learn. Then one has clearly seen causally arisen objects by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. This is dependent origination. This is a teaching that I'm going to share with you guys. That's the highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddha, where there's 12 interlinking steps that's going to show you exactly why you experience discontentedness and why you keep experiencing rebirth over and over again. So you would have independently verified that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. And it sometimes takes time. That's why I said it's taken some people, I've seen 6 months or even a year to learn this. There was a student when I taught this retreat the very first time several years ago, is actually sitting right here. He had been studying Buddhism with other teachers, and I was teaching dependent origination. And after I taught it, he was like, oh my gosh, I've been trying to understand this for 10 years, and now I finally understand it. So he was trying to understand it with other teachers for so long, but now he finally got it. The light bulb went off and he started to understand it, right? So it's going to take you some time to understand dependent origination. I don't think it's going to take you 10 years, but it's going to take you some time to understand it. But this is something that you would have clearly seen by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, and you would have verified that. And the way that you might think about all these benefits in getting to the first stage of enlightenment is that you'll have everything you need to make your way to the fourth stage of enlightenment, where the mind is actually enlightened. The way that you might think about the first stage of enlightenment is like base camp at Mount Everest. I don't know if any of you guys have ever traversed Mount Everest. I surely haven't, as you guys can probably tell, right? But when you get to Mount Everest, you're not going to just stumble your way into base camp at Mount Everest. That's not the way that that occurs. If you're going to get to base camp at Mount Everest with an opportunity to get to the summit, you've done a lot of work to be able to get to base camp, right? You've done like some testing, you've done some hiking, you've done some trekking, you've, tested out some equipment, you've tried different things, you've been on multiple different guided tours before. You don't just stumble your way into base camp at Mount Everest. You've gotten there with some intention. And now that you're at base camp at Mount Everest, you've got everything you need to get to the summit. You're not there yet, but you've got everything you need. And it's the same thing that's true about the first stage of enlightenment. By the time you've gotten there, you haven't stumbled your way into it. You've intentionally worked with determination and dedication to get there, but you've got everything you need to be able to get to enlightenment. You've got the teachings that you need. You've got a teacher. You've developed your practice. You still need guidance from the first stage of enlightenment to enlightenment, but you've got everything you need to be able to traverse your way to enlightenment itself. So that's one of the ways you might think about the first stage of enlightenment. So these are all the benefits that you're going to see. And there's others that we don't talk about, because then when you start talking about them with us, we'll know that you're actually in the first stage of enlightenment, because you need to determine for yourself that you're in the first stage of enlightenment. I'm not going to tell you that you're in the first stage. You need to know that for yourself. So that's why learning more and more about what the first stage of enlightenment is, you'll be able to determine for yourself whether you're in that first stage or not. But the thing about the first stage of enlightenment, you're not going to put it on your Facebook profile. You're not going to call up mom and be like, hey, mom, aren't you proud of me? I'm in the first stage of enlightenment, right? This would be like ego and arrogance, right? The way that the Buddha teaches these stages of enlightenment, it's like personal growth plan for yourself. So you can plot your steps in your journey. So you might talk to your teacher about whether you think you're in the first stage of enlightenment or not, but you're not going to go out into the world and be, discussing this with countless people, because you're working to eliminate the ego and the arrogance and the conceit. And if you were out there bragging about this kind of stuff, you would be walking in the opposite direction. But these are some of the qualities for someone who's actually gotten into the first stage of enlightenment. So in terms of our retreat schedule and plan, the way that I think about a retreat and all the courses and learning programs that I have to be able to help people to journey to enlightenment is I think of it like this staircase right here. That my role is like a tour guide. I'm helping you to be able to see, hey, here's the staircase and here's the way to get to enlightenment. You're the one that needs to walk up the staircase, but I'm the one that's showing it to you. I'm the one that's helping you to be able to see that it even exists and what is the staircase. But you're the one that needs to do the work to walk up the staircase. So that's the way that I think about these retreats. It's not me coming in and giving you a lecture or a sermon or anything like that. It's me coming in and helping you to understand what is the path to enlightenment, like a tour guide, pointing out for you the things that you need to understand so that then you can actually traverse your way up to the path to enlightenment. Yeah, if you guys could check your mics, I think we have a mic on somewhere. That's that little feedback that we're getting in the speakers. So you're walking up this stairway and your teacher is helping you to be able to see what the stairway actually is. So in terms of the way that we're actually going to do this is each Monday through Friday, we're going to get together at 9 a.m. in the morning. And we're going to start with some meditation and chanting, just like we did today, where if you'd like to come in and join, you can just get a chanting sheet from the cabinet, and we're just going to start with some chanting. I'll welcome you in the morning. We'll do some chanting, some meditation, kind of get you guys in the flow of doing meditation each morning. Because if you're going to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to need to build up your meditation practice. And you can do that here as part of our time together, where each day you can be meditating, because we're going to meditate in the morning and we're going to meditate in the evening as well. At 9:30, I'm going to start sharing some teachings where I think about it as a discussion. Some people call it a Dhamma talk, which is a talk about the teachings. And then somewhere around 10:30, 11-ish, I'll be taking a break, kind of like a mid-morning break. And then we'll come back from that break and I'll share another topic with you up to 12:30. And then at 12:30, we're going to go and do some excursions. If you guys would like to go, you're more than welcome to. These are planned events where we can go outside into the community, taking the things that you learned in the morning and applying them into your day-to-day life. Sometimes if you've been to a retreat before in other places, you might have went to a silent retreat. I don't teach silent retreats. The way that I think about it is the world is like wide open with all kinds of things going on in the world. Well, if you swing all the way to the other side of that, you've got a silent retreat where things are really shut down, where the phones are gone, everybody's quiet, everybody's not talking. It's 8, 10, 12 hours of meditation, eating, sleeping, and that's it, right? Well, in the middle is where I see that I'm teaching, as I teach what's called an active retreat. That when we're together and we're learning, we're plugged in and we're actually learning the teachings. But then we can go out and have fun, right? And we can go out and do these excursions, which is taking the things that you've learned and applying them on these excursions. So if you'd like to go to any of these, you're more than welcome to. I have 5 different ones that are planned. And whether you choose to go to them is up to you. You could use it as free time from 12:30 to 6:30, or if you'd like to go outside and explore and do some things and hang out with each other, meet some new friends, apply the teachings that you've been learning in the morning, there's an opportunity for you to do that. So the way that we have this set up is that on Sunday, if you guys would like, the walking market is right there. If you guys would like to go out to the walking market and spend some time together, have some food, get to know each other, it's a great thing to do. Normally I would go on that with you guys, but recently we started the meditation in the main hall at 6:30. So I probably won't be able to really go. I probably will start walking with you guys, but I probably won't be able to go very far because I need to actually get prepared to teach at 6:30 in the main hall, which you guys are welcome to come to that too if you like. But if you're out enjoying the Sunday night walking market, then maybe you do that. Then on Monday, we're going to go to Sangapeng Hot Springs. This is a place where you can go and soak in the hot spring water. It's kind of like an outdoor spa. They have massages, they have hot springs. They actually have a swimming pool that's with the hot spring water if you like to do that kind of thing. If you've ever been interested in a cool fall day to be in a hot swimming pool, this is a kind of a cool thing to do. So tomorrow, if you're going to come to that, you might decide to bring a bathing suit or some swimming clothes. They also have clothes there that you can purchase if you don't have that. So you can get it there if you like. So you might decide to bring something to go to that if you'd like to go there. Then on Tuesday, if you'd like to go to the elephant sanctuary, there's an elephant sanctuary that I organized that normally it costs 1,600 baht per person to go, but they give it to us for only 800 baht. So it's half price. They actually have a van that comes and picks you up right here, and then they take you out about an hour outside the city. You actually get to interact with the animals. They don't do rides. They don't cage their elephants. They don't do any kind of shows or anything like that. It's just a pure sanctuary. You'll be able to chop up food and make food for the elephants. You'll be able to make medicine for the elephants. You'll be able to pet them and get right up close to them and bathe them if you like, and basically care for the elephants. Your money actually goes for the care to take care of the elephant. In fact, that 800 baht is what they use in order to buy the food for the elephants to be able to eat. They're going to actually have showers out there where they're actually going to, if you like, you can take off your current clothes. You will put on a set of clothes that they give you. Then you'll play with the elephants and chop up the food and all that stuff. Then you can take a shower and then you can put your clothes back on. They're going to feed you while you're there. They give you a really nice meal and then they bring you all the way back here, and all of that for 800 baht. So if you'd like to do that, this is a very well done sanctuary that you can go check out if you'd like to check that out on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, we're going to go to a children's orphanage. There's an orphanage that I've been going to for many years, and they've recently been upgrading their facility, and I've been seeing them grow over the years. So if you guys would like, what we usually do is we kind of like put our resources together. We go to the store, we buy a whole bunch of supplies, and then we take those to the orphanage, and then you kind of get a tour of the orphanage and see what the orphanage is like, and we actually contribute all of these goods to be able to help the orphanage, and then we come back here afterwards. Then on Thursday, we go to Hua Tung Tao, which is a lake, a reservoir, or a park. It's kind of like a nature area where they have bungalows all the way around the reservoir. And we just go there. We have really great food that they serve us, really nice food. And then you can do things like massages. They have nature trails. They have a zip line. They have ATVs. They have just walking around the reservoir. They have paddle boats. They have all kinds of things that you can get into while you're over there. It's just kind of like a day outside, recreation day. And then we ultimately make our way back here. So these are the excursions that we have. And what I'm going to do is each day I'm going to check in with you guys to see who would like to go to these so that I can organize transportation. Because what I normally do is I organize private vans to be able to take us out on these events. And it normally ends up costing about 250 baht per person to be able to go for the transportation. And then each one of these events, there might be a fee associated with them. So like, for example, tomorrow, Sangapeng, I think it's 100 baht to get in or something like that, 150 baht to get in. So with the transportation, it might be like 400 baht, 500 baht. So what I would like to do is just get a preliminary idea of if you guys are interested in doing these things so that I can start organizing them. If you're not interested in it, it's okay, because I've been to these things many times. I have a blast, but I only continue to do it because students are usually interested in doing these things. So I'd like to just get a preliminary idea. Is there anybody who's interested in going on at least one of these excursions during the week? Okay. How many of you are interested in going on 2 of these excursions? Okay. How about 3 of them? And 4? And all of them. Okay, so I'll start organizing these. So what I'm going to do is tomorrow morning at our first lunch break, or I'm sorry, at our first mid-morning break, I will say, okay, everybody, who would like to go to the hot springs? And then I see 5 people or 6 people or 10 people are interested in going. And then at the first break, I will start organizing the transportation so that at lunchtime, we're able to then take the transportation to go to the hot springs. And then we'll make our way back here by 6:30, which is when class is going to start. And we're going to factor in food as part of it. So So normally we eat lunch before we leave, but some of these we actually eat lunch on the way. So we'll just see how things are going. So I'll check in with you guys each morning. But if you're going to go to the hot springs, I just suggest that you bring some bathing suit, but you don't have to, because they also have this little trough where you can just go and soak your feet. That's what I usually do. I just go and soak my feet in the hot water. But they also do have private bungalows that you can rent, and you can go into a private bungalow and you can close the door and you can actually soak naked if that's what you'd like to do. You can do it that way too. But if you'd like to go in the swimming pool, they ask that you wear a swimming suit, or you can just soak your feet like I mentioned. So there's all these different options there. So do you guys have any questions on the excursions? I saw some hands pop up. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So this is the plan, and we'll just kind of ebb and flow as things go. Okay. Then when we come back from the excursions at 6:30, we're going to do meditation again. And then at 7, I'll start the talk for whatever the evening talk is. And then we usually finish up right around 8:30. So we're going to have about 3.5 hours in the morning to learn, 6 hours of free time. We're going out and doing excursions. And then there's going to be another 2 hours of learning in the evening. So we'll be finished up right around 8:30 each day. And when we finish at 8:30, we need to make our way out of the temple, because the monks usually are going to sleep by 9 o'clock. They're usually locking up and stuff like that. And we need to be aware that when we're here, that when we leave at 8:30, while we might be very jovial and be very happy and, talking about different things, there's people here that are trying to get to sleep. So when we leave, we'll just need to be kind of quiet as we leave. So just keep that in mind each evening as you're leaving. And then on Friday, we're not going to have any excursions. We're just going to take an 1.5 hour lunch break, get some lunch local here, and then we'll come back and we'll end up finishing up right around 5. Although this Friday is a little bit different because there's a community feast that's being organized. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. If you'd like to stick around, we're going to probably finish at 4 o'clock this Friday, because at 4 o'clock on Friday, the students are organizing a big feast. Some people might call it a potluck, where everybody brings a dish or 2 or 3, and then we share food. So if you guys would like to do that on Friday at 4, you're more than welcome to participate in that or enjoy the food from that. And then at 6 p.m., we have a social event every Friday, which is called Temple Fun Night. These things aren't part of the retreat, but if you guys would like to stick around for those, you're more than welcome to. So I'll just give you a heads up for those. This is a bookmark that you can see the complete schedule of the retreat. If you haven't seen it already, you can go to this website and you'll see exactly when I'm going to be teaching each individual topic. So if you need this particular bookmark, you'll find it on our website. Okay. So here's the topics that I'm going to be sharing with you guys as part of the retreat. Is tomorrow morning, I'm going to do a breathing mindfulness meditation with you guys and teaching you guys what this is. I'm going to teach you the ins and outs of it and how it fits in to the path to enlightenment and the teachings of the Buddha. Then I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment, because if you're going to make your way towards this goal of enlightenment, you need to know what it is so that you can more easily navigate your way to it. Then I'm going to teach you the 4 Noble Truths. This is establishing right view. This is the very first teaching of the Buddha that's going to really help you to get on the path to enlightenment. It's kind of like the trail marker. If you're going to take a hike, there's usually a trail marker that explaining to you what it is that you're going to encounter on this trail. That's what the 4 Noble Truths is. This is the very first teaching that the Buddha would share with his students. So I'm going to share this with you in 4 simple statements that you can independently verify. What is the problem in your mind? What is the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward of how to fix it. Then after our excursion, going to the hot springs, then we'll come back and I'll teach you the 3 poisons. This is going to deepen your understanding of what's going on in the unenlightened mind and really broaden it as well. Tuesday, we're going to be doing walking meditation. This is a meditation that's really good if you're noticing you're falling asleep in your meditation, or if you have an overactive mind and you have difficulties calming down and relaxing and being in meditation. Walking meditation is good for that. I'm going to teach you the 8-fold path. This is the path for all humans to enlightenment. I'm going to teach you this inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. I'm going to teach it to you with the words of the Buddha so that you can understand this teaching in depth. Because if you're going to get to the first stage of enlightenment or enlightenment itself, you're going to need to know this teaching. You wouldn't be able to get to even the first stage of enlightenment without knowing this particular teaching. Then the 5 precepts is going to be in the evening. That actually plugs into the Eightfold Path, because the Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha, and the 5 precepts plugs into it. So I'm going to show you what the 5 precepts are using the original words of the Buddha. If you've learned that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, that's not the teachings of the Buddha. He never taught that. That sounds like rules and commandments. It sounds like black and white. I'm going to use the original words of the Buddha so you can see much more illuminating language around this important topic, so you can see how it plugs into the Eightfold Path. Then on Wednesday, I'm going to teach you loving kindness meditation. This is a meditation that's going to help essentially rewire your mind to be more loving and kind. This is what's going to eliminate your anger, hatred, ill will, and all the lesser versions like frustration, agitation, annoyance. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't even have the slightest dislike towards other people. Where right now there might be people you like and people that you dislike. Well, that dislike is actually coming from your own mind, and you can actually eliminate that. And this loving kindness meditation is an important component of that, but you wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to the elimination of anger, but it is an important component. There's other things that you need besides meditation. So I'm going to teach you guys that on Wednesday morning. Then I'm going to teach you what is Kama and how does it affect me. We're going to go in and I'm going to teach you the 4 types of Kama. The wholesome Kama, unwholesome Kama, old Kama, and new Kama. You're going to need to know these 4 types of Kama in order to be able to awaken to this natural law. Everything that the Buddha taught in one way or another comes back to this natural law. But on Wednesday, I'm going to actually go in and share with you details about this natural law, because by the time you get to the enlightened mental state, you will have extinguished all your unwholesome Kama. You will only be experiencing wholesome Kama by the time you get to that mental state. So you're going to need to know these 4 types in order to be able to do that. Then I'm going to teach you what is merit. I'm going to teach you this understanding and experiencing the jhanas. The light bulb is flickering. This is those preliminary phases that the mind goes through where you experience enhanced qualities of mind on your way to the first stage of enlightenment. Then on Thursday, I'm going to teach you understanding human beings, the 5 aggregates in the 6 sense spaces. Because one of the things that the Buddha is teaching you is essentially giving you the instruction manual to this being who you are. You have something called the 5 aggregates and the 6 sense bases. And if you don't understand what these things are, then you're not going to be able to understand how to move your mind to this enlightened mental state. So this particular teachings are going to help you to understand this being who you are, essentially handing you the instruction manual to this being. And now you can actually more skillfully work with this being in order to be able to move the mind to enlightenment. Then I'm going to teach you dependent origination. That's the highest, most ultimate truth of the teachings of the Buddha, those 12 interlinking steps. Then I'm going to teach you how to develop accomplishment in view to attain the first stage of enlightenment. The Four Noble Truths will help you establish right view, but then you're going to need to know how to develop accomplishment in view. This is beyond the Four Noble Truths. I'm going to teach you guys that. Then I'm going to teach you how to eliminate personal existence view. This is a pollution of the mind. There's 3 fetters or 3 pollutions that the unenlightened mind has that are eliminated by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. There's 10 total, but to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you would eliminate the first 3. So I'm going to spend an entire class period explaining to you what is personal existence view, what are the symptoms of personal existence view, so you can verify that you have this in your mind. I'm going to teach you how to eliminate it and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. Then I'm going to do the same thing with this fetter of doubt. I'm going to explain to you what it is, the symptoms of it, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. Then I'm going to do the same thing with wrong behavior in observances. This is another pollution of mind. I'll teach you what it is, the symptoms of it, how to eliminate it, how to know that you've actually eliminated it. And I'm also going to be teaching you this meditation to realize non-self as part of helping you to understand personal existence view. Then by the time we get to Friday, I'm also going to teach you how to determine if you've attained the first stage of enlightenment so that you'll know when your mind is actually in the first stage of enlightenment. Ultimately, I'm going to teach you how to integrate what you've learned here into your day-to-day life, because If we spend 5 days together and you don't integrate anything that I've taught you, okay, we had a great 5 days together. But if you're really interested in getting benefit out of what you've done here for 5 days, you need to know how to integrate it. That's one of the things that the people talk that they have the most struggles with when they go away to a retreat, is how to take what they've learned and integrate it into their day-to-day life. So I'm going to show you how to actually do that by the time we get to the end. And I'm going to teach you how to receive continued support as part of your journey. And then we're going to have a closing group discussion where there might be a certain topic that I taught on Monday or Tuesday. And maybe you asked some questions on Monday or Tuesday, but you've had some additional questions since then, and it doesn't really fit into any of the other topics that I've been teaching, where there's kind of like a catch-all day, kind of like a miscellaneous time where it's like, all right, any and all questions that you have up to this point, what are they? And let's discuss them. So if there are certain topics that we've discussed earlier in the retreat and you've been thinking about it for a few days, and now there's some questions that you have, you can always ask them in that. And of course, as we go on excursions and we have lunches together and stuff like that, you can ask me questions at any time that you like. But we've got this scheduled that if there's any questions that didn't get answered all the way throughout the retreat, you've got an opportunity to ask those at the end. So this is our plan. Any questions on this? No questions? Okay. Oh, we have something coming in here on Zoom. Let me see. Okay, Rachel is asking, hello, David. May you kindly share the screen with us? Oh, I am so sorry, Rachel. I went through that entire talk without sharing that with you. Sorry about that impermanence. And Claire says, I would like to go to the hot springs. Okay, so we know that Claire is interested to go to the hot springs. All right. All right, so now just a couple more things. This retreat is based on the very first book from the book series. It's titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. I'm not covering everything that's in this book in this retreat, but about 2.5 days you'll find in this retreat. The other 2.5 days is found in volume 5 of the book series. You can get this for free. You can download them from our website. You can take it and go print it if you like. You can get printed versions here at the temple by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can get it on Amazon if your country has access to Amazon. So these are the 2 books that are really focused for this retreat. But you might even say that this retreat is volume 1 through 5, but really it's focusing on volume 1 and 5. But you could really say the other ones are involved as well. Okay? And then just lastly, the way that I think about these retreats and all the work that I do here in order to be able to help people understand the path to enlightenment is I think about it like we are restoring the teachings of the Buddha back into the world in a way that people will actually be able to learn and grow and develop, not only now during our lifetime, but long into the future. This path to enlightenment is about your learning, your growth, and your development. But by doing so, it actually brings the teachings into the world in a way that are very tangible for you to be able to experience the benefits. But also, as people interact with you, you're going to be able to share those teachings with those people if they're interested and if they ask. So in this way, by you learning and growing and developing on the path, it's like restoring the teachings of the Buddha back into the world. Because for a very long time, the teachings have been slowly declining in the world. And the Buddha talked about this, that that's what would happen. But now we're in a period of time where people are interested in seeing them be restored, and you can be part of that. We're in a retreat like this, as you're learning and growing and developing for your own growth and development, it's helping you, but it's also helping all those people around you, because as you're being more loving and kind and warm and gentle, it's helping the people around you as well. And it's also helping all of humanity become a more loving, kind, gentler, and kinder society. So that's the way I think about these. So while we have lots of fun in these retreats, it's also a time to make sure that we're really focused on what the real goal is here, which is helping you to get to the first stage of enlightenment and beyond. So that's the way I think about these retreats. It's like creating heaven on earth, because as all of us become more loving and kind and warm and gentle, and it perpetuates throughout the world, more and more people are experiencing the peace and the joy. So what we do in this retreat really matters. So let's make the most of it. Okay? And on that note, that's the very last thing. If you guys would like to go have fun, and the Sunday night walking market, you're more than welcome to. I saw that they put up a light show tonight. It's the first time. I haven't seen it yet. I just saw a preview of it in a video. But over in this temple, just on the other side of the main building, they're having a light show tonight. There's the market out there at 6:30. I'm going to be doing loving kindness meditation in the main hall. So there's lots of opportunities for you here, but maybe you like to just go home and get some rest and rest up for the week. Perhaps you might decide to do that too. But if you guys would like to go out to the night market, I'm sure some of you guys have been before. Maybe you guys can just all get together at the tables out front, and then you guys can head off and go enjoy some food and different things together. But then on Monday, tomorrow at 9 a.m., that's where I'm going to start with sharing the teachings of the Buddha with you guys some more. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for all your dedication and commitment that you're going to be applying over the next 5 days to be learning and growing and developing. If at any point you need any help, always you're welcome to ask me questions during this retreat or afterwards. And just look forward to sharing the teachings of the Buddha with you. So have a very lovely rest of your evening, whatever you choose to do. And perhaps I'll see you tomorrow morning. Okay? Sawadee Kap. Sawadee Kap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.